So nice to have you all here. Thank you for coming. Last presentation of the day. Everything that we're going to talk about here are things that we can help you out with. It's not going to be mentioning what we do and so on until the last phase where I'm going to show you some use cases. I'd like to bring to you today a situation that we're seeing within e-commerce fashion and e-commerce in general, a theoretical approach on how to solve that, and then a practical list of cases where we actually tackle that. So data-driven future is a big name, so I hope we make honest to that challenge. So the idea is to update how you use your data, and the subtitle is the tale of bankruptcy. So the important part is actually very small, that some companies are going bankrupt, there is a consolidation. Some companies are just not profitable, so they might not be going bankrupt, but they rely a lot on constant investment. So the message here will be around changing the focus from just revenue to seeing if you're doing enough regarding profit and what could be causing your profit not to help you out. There's a saying that revenue is vanity and cash is sanity and profit is king. I think that's very fair. So 44% of online retailers are facing financial ruin in the UK with only 20% remaining profitable. Now, I know that's UK. You guys here, we're in Germany and we have people from everywhere. Why is this in the UK? First of all, we're a company that is heavily, with a lot of British clients, so heavily invested in the UK and performing very, very well. And also in Central Europe. Now, you could say, well, this number here is a little bit alarming. Where did you get it from? So I got it from a study performed by ourselves in partnership with some people from consultants from Forrester and other agencies like that. So you're going to see some data that hopefully is new and relevant to you. So that is the problem we want to tackle. Companies are not really looking at profitability. So, we're talking about e-commerce, so let me show you a good picture. Some of you might actually have more insight into those numbers. If ever this is not correct, please let me know, because it will be very valuable for me to update. But this is actually the outcome of that research with Forrester. So the companies that are performing well, that are profitable, that are not facing bankruptcy risk, are companies like those ones, and we're talking about a good conversion rate, average order value, frequency, and margin. I'm gonna tell you later why we're looking at these KPIs. I mean, of course, we all look at these KPIs, but there is even a logic why to look into those. Now, this is not the time to be average. So what does that mean? This is average. So average is, from the companies we've researched, 0.8, conversion rate with a much smaller average order value, frequency, and margin. Of course, order value and frequency will depend on what you sell. So everything here is a little bit industry dependent. But the point is just work these levers out. They make a big difference. If you're profitable, you're working these levers well. If you're not profitable, you're probably not working them too well. And what causes if you don't work them well is that you can be like one of these brands and face some sort of financial restructuring. Some of these names are quite well known. So, I mean, the lack of barriers to enter into the space also means that eventually there is an effort to consolidate around those that are actually profitable, more efficient, and so on. So you can come, you can build a brand, you can grow your revenue, eventually you can run out of money and be out. What's the angle that we want to bring here? Is acquisition your best strategy? It's a question, right? I know people invest a lot in acquisition. In the different presentation that I do, we have this data point that companies spend roughly 80 times more on acquisition than they do on retention. 80 pounds to every 1 pound on retention. So there's a lot of money going there, and then you acquire them, great, then they buy something, great, and then they go away. Then they leave. Unless you can invest into that retention, it's very unlikely you're going to be profitable with that customer base. So the formula that sums that up, and this is the theoretical framework, is that your cost of acquisition has to be smaller than the lifetime value they will bring. Obvious. But who actually looks at that? When you go and you buy customers, you go into Google and you buy the customers, are you looking if that pound, that euro, becomes 2 euros over lifetime, or if that just becomes a cent? So it has to always become more, and as any financial calculation, the longer it takes to return, the less interesting it is. So acquisition has to be smaller than lifetime value. So a couple examples, business A versus business B, because okay, it's gonna be bigger, but how much bigger? So business A would have an acquisition cost of 10 with an average lifetime value of whoever you acquire of 40. A business B would have 200 to 400. So you see different sort of industries. That one's selling high-end things. This one's selling FMCG. The ratio 1 to 4, ratio 1 to 2. This ratio is going to be very, very interesting. Now, if your ratio gets too big, it means that you're generating a lot of revenue out of a small acquisition. You probably could be acquiring more, because it means you could lower the quality of your acquisition. You'll be okay. Now, if your ratio is 1 to 1, you're basically paying back your acquisition, but you're paying back in time. So it's not really interesting. So this ratio you wanna manage, and different businesses will have different places to work with. So what is the composition of this formula? The composition is the KPIs we were looking in the beginning. The average order value, the conversion rate, the frequency, the margin. That's what composes. So, you know, the cost per visit is what you're putting there on Google, right? Out of that traffic, how much converts? You split those two so that you're looking at the same sort of group of people on both sides. So on both sides, you're only looking at people who actually bought. Then on lifetime value is how much that person will, you know, how frequently will they buy over time? What is the size of that purchase? And what is the margin? Because also, sometimes you just want to make revenue, you want to increase your numbers, and you sell products that are zero margin, negative margin, and that's great for revenue, that's very bad for profit. So that's very good if you're in early stage with lots of funding, lots of cash. It's not so good if you're already in your second round of funding or looking for stability. So how does this look like? So we got the problem, we got the theoretical framework. Now let's look at some ways to work with that. The first way is not even Exponea. By the way, my company is Exponea. I don't think I mentioned that. This is Google Analytics. So I mean, everyone can do that. And what you're talking about here is where the customer is coming from. So where they come from would allow you to know which sort of acquisition channels are reverting back to X purchases, X browsing, X visits. So this is something I believe everybody could do, and it's already a first step. Now, the second thing you want to do to promote that sort of retention is make a dialogue. So if you know where they came from, where you acquired them, this is just a suggestion of a flow, but what you're going to do is start talking to them regarding how do they perform afterwards within your business. So you acquired, they're in, great. Let's assume you've prioritized, as we showed on this last slide, you prioritize the channels that actually bring you the right sort of people. You prioritize the campaigns that are bringing the right sort of people, but now you've got to work with them. And working means knowing what they're doing, knowing what they're browsing, what they're purchasing, trying it out, recommendations, and if there is no engagement, you don't just go on a stupid loop, no engagement recommendations and keep trying. You will send a survey so you can know what's happening there. So if the previous slide was about choosing the acquisition channels that are interesting to you, this one is about how can you actually work on retention. So this is what we do. So this is a cohort analysis, hopefully not too messy, but I've seen this in a couple times already, so now for me it's looking okay. So the size of this mountain is your revenue, so it's growing. And each color is a cohort. So these are customers that you acquired in the first date, these are customers you acquired on the second, these you acquired in the third. And what you can see is, for example, this red group so a specific acquisition campaign you did, they start off quite nice. You got a lot of revenue from it. Over time, they're gone. They become quite small. The yellow one looks better. In the beginning, you got this size, and the size of the share remains there. So these are people you acquired, and they remained. You don't have to acquire them again. You don't have to spend that money again. What happens if you just invest in acquisition and you don't look at the lifetime value? This, making a bunch of acquisition campaigns, hiring, getting customers, but your total revenue eventually just parks. They park because you're now just going to the market to buy kind of the same people you lost, or different people, but you're losing people anyways. So here again, bad campaign, the red is a bad campaign, the gray is a good one. I mean, sustain its size over time. So that's the sort of behavior you want to look. If you get a lot of gray ones, then your total revenue is growing in a nice way. If you want to deleverage on acquisition, you better have a bunch of gray ones as well. Because otherwise, if you stop acquiring, you just go down. Okay. This last one is just saying that when you're then prioritizing your campaigns, your channels, look at what sort of customer goes in there. So for example, the example here is delivery or online is much more, much stronger. So in this example, have a lot more orders and so on. But the brick and mortars, if you see that these are retention rate groups, what you want is all customers down here. So customers that you acquire through that channel that stay. And then that brick and mortar channel could have a much higher retention than a delivery channel. So just an example to say, just look at the pattern of the customer from the acquisition that you're bringing in. Okay, now I'm just going to show you 5 cases of things we did and wrap up for questions. So the first one, optimizing customer acquisition cost. So this is an Exponea view, and that's a Facebook view. So what we're doing here is we can retarget customers. So just get whatever they're doing on your website and just go on Facebook and say, these people are interesting. These people have been buying stuff. So we compared here just Facebook basic retargeting or campaign with a campaign that was made by targeting people who we predicted had high likelihood of a conversion. And the uplift was 18%, meaning that if you just know people that perform well, when you push them to Facebook and you say, find people like this one, you're actually giving to Facebook a proxy of what type of people are good acquisition targets for you. The second one would be just conversion, right? So pushing conversion is you acquired, I mean, they're in your site, now you gotta do the job, you gotta push them through. And this one is just very simple, is you're just looking at a product and you have the wish list on the site. So, I mean, you probably see this in many places. These are just ideas on how to change the look of a website. If you add other products that go well with that first one, could be an incentive to purchase. So basically, the web personalization is your strongest tool for conversion, especially if it's contextual to the product that you're looking or to the category. You don't have to know a lot about the previous history of the customer. The third would be about average order value. So I know we have some Polish here in the event today, so you might know that name or not, BD Sklep. Now, what is this? It's an abandoned cart with other recommended products in the cart. Pretty trivial. You already have the abandoned cart. Why not also take some other products that go well with those? Increases order value. Frequency. So I really wanted to bring something different here. That's why this survey, because people usually think in terms of I speak, and the customer listens, and the customer reacts to me. This one is the customer talking to you and just saying how was his experience, his or her experience. And if ever that was bad, we would send a free text survey just understanding why it was bad. And that allows you to increase frequency by just really solving the pain points that they had and that you're unaware of or might be unaware of. And then the final one would be just margin. So here we have a way, we work with product catalogs that can be updated daily or even more frequently. they could have the margin of the products. So as you're recommending something, you're showing there on a page, you might want to recommend just what has a margin higher than 10%, higher than 20, and we can definitely control that, so whatever you're showing is not eating your margin. So those tackle the 5 pillars, tackle the acquisition, conversion, frequency, average order value, and margin. So what do we take away from this? Focus on profit, depending on your company stage, right? But focus on profit. If you can go on revenue, then fine, go. If you're acquiring customers, work on acquisition channels that bring good quality. After you brought them, nurture them, work with them, because it's too expensive to acquire. So create a dialogue to nurture them, and focus the energy where it delivers most impact. So you know that Google Analytics view that I said about acquisition channels and how they're performing over time. Just really stop investing on places that bring you customers that don't retain, or change your strategy. We recommend a ratio for e-commerce of about 4:1. So we're talking about the ratios. Why is that? If the lifetime of the customers, the lifetime value of the customers you bring is 20 times higher than your acquisition cost, it means that whoever you bring that is about 10 or 15 times higher than that cost of acquisition, it's someone you're not gonna bring again. You're not gonna go out there. So for an e-commerce, which is kind of a high volume sort of thing, on average, you would want to go a little bit further than that. You wanna have a customer that doesn't pay you back that much because your volume is gonna compensate for how much that customer brought. But you definitely don't wanna operate with a 1-to-1, because that payback will be, as I said, over time. But it's just a recommendation. This is a new formula where, we've been introducing this for a year now. It's not, since lifetime value is for lifetime, I think this can be more robust over time. This is a little bit of a maturity journey. So when you're acquiring the customer, they're just visitors, how can you take them all the way up to loyalty? And there's a lot to do there. The acquisition, when they're out there in the market, is just one phase. But this is trivial, we all know. You start by talking to them, getting them interested. If you can make the first conversion, if you can make the second conversion, I guess most of you have analyzed that. After second conversion, you get a lot better retention. But it's not just about pushing for the conversion. It's about getting them interested. Yeah, so we are on booth E4.1. It's all the way over there. Thank you for being here. Open for questions.
Thank you, Bruno. Okay, who's the first question? Yes.
Bruno, thank you very much. Very interesting. You have been talking about lifetime value, and it looks like it's a formula, like a fixed value. It's standing there like, well, I have an average kind of lifetime value, but actually it's very different for different kinds of customers. And if you go by that formula, you risk to spend too much money on people who have a low lifetime value. How can you distinguish?
How can I distinguish people with low from people with high? Okay,
Yes.
it's a great question. So okay, lifetime value only makes sense if it's a predictive effort, because it doesn't really make sense to just look back and you can say this person is probably similar to that one, but that essentially is a predictive effort. What we try is to predict for each customer what is based on how they have behaved until that moment. So if they just came to your website in the last 5 minutes, it's probably very little data for you to accurately predict, but over time this will consolidate. Try to predict all the different pillars that I said. So how frequently, how many purchases will they make based on the other customers you have in your database? What's the average order value based on the items they're browsing? How often are they coming? How are they opening emails? What is the sort of product that they buy? So then about margin, that's a conversation we're still evolving, because even though we can ingest margin today, it doesn't really reflect to your product assortment in 3 years. So you gotta probably operate with an average margin. So we work with predictive algorithms that we have embedded that look back into the browsing, purchase pattern, campaign reaction pattern to try to at the individual level say what's the most likely lifetime value. However, this can change, as you know. Does that kind of cover? I know it's not trivial. Yeah.
Hang on.
Are you able to distinguish in your campaigns also, spending less money on certain target groups?
Yes. So that's essentially the idea, because we execute on omni-channel. So we have emails, SMS. We can also trigger call centers, for example, and website personalization and push. So what I would say is, if the lifetime value is quite low, you could definitely provide customer service at web and push, because those are very cheap channels. You could, if the lifetime value is medium, you could go for emails, for example, and maybe SMS. And if they're really high lifetime values, doesn't matter if they buy VIP stuff. They could buy small stuff, but very frequently. You could then direct them to a call center. So you do channel selection based on lifetime value.
Any further questions to watch this box? Anybody? No? All right.
Thank you.
Then, as always, I think, Bruno, you're more than welcome to answer some private questions as well, right next to the stage. And thank you for your keynote. Thank you for listening. Thanks for coming up. I think we're done for today. Thanks for showing up on the fourth edition of e-commerce. Thanks for coming in, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.